provide reasons for young people to stay here or to come back here if they have left. Incredibly important. Getting behind local entrepreneurs, business owners, Seminar Brewing, and others to make sure that they're successful right here in Florence, and that success serves as an attraction to others to come and spend, their money, but also plant their flag here in this community. The same kind of challenge that we have in El Paso, Texas right now, trying to recruit young people to come back. We talked about gun violence and the fact that we are a little more than a month away from the 1-year anniversary of 2 police officers in this community being killed, and the need to confront gun violence in America, to acknowledge that we have 40,000 gun violence deaths in this country every year, a number that is not seen in any other wealthy or developed country on the face of the planet. We accept either that it is our fate and our fortune, our future and our lot, or to the gentleman's point, we decide that this is a human-caused problem and that we have a human solution to it. So to the calls to do something, let me run this by you, and then you tell me how you feel. So if we follow your lead here in South Carolina, Jim Clyburn in particular, who's tried to lead the effort in closing the Charleston loophole, which means that it doesn't matter how long it takes us to do that background check, or whether you buy that gun online or at a gun show, all loopholes and exceptions are closed. If you own a firearm in this country, you will have a background check, so we can prevent those who should not own them from possessing them, using them against themselves or against others or against people in our communities. Adopting red flag laws everywhere, not on a state-by-state or community-by-community basis. So if you have a firearm and you are possessing that firearm and are demonstrating a tendency to use that firearm against yourself or someone else, we take that before it's too late. We end the sales of weapons of war. So AK-47s, AR-15s, designed exclusively
You're assuming, I was just reading your favorite commentator, Ben Shapiro, said this. He said that what's happening in America today is there's less religion, there are less goals, people are not getting married, people are not looking forward to goals and stuff in their lives. Basically, the fiber of America is what's failing. When I was little, you're talking to a rocket scientist. I know you don't believe that, but it's the truth. There was I had goals. I'm a son of immigrants, and we prayed in school. Our worst problem in school was chewing gum under the desktops. Okay? So there was goals, and our country made it to the moon. Now what's happened is all of this has gone away. Let me finish. And because all of this stuff has gone away, people are what's failing. The other thing that's happening is that in our face, everybody's got a cell phone, including me. It's that we're getting bombarded more and more with all of this violence and stuff. And so America's becoming more and more violent. We have a tendency to violence. The only thing that can save America is the Lord Jesus. Because He's the only one that's got the power to do it. And we've got to be willing to do it His way. Last thing, you will be responsible, and you are responsible because you are a political leader. You may be a bigger, wait a minute, Lance. You may become a bigger political leader, but either you will lead your constituents. Wait, Lance, I'm talking, Lance. You either.
Hold on a second. He will finish his statement. We're going to let you have the microphone without interruption. Could you bring this to a conclusion?
I will. And the only thing I encourage is remember, whatever you do as a leader, you will either lead people toward more godliness or you will lead people to more godlessness. Their blood will be on your hands and my hands too. So please do what's godly.
Thank you. Listen, hold on a sec. Please. And someone just reminded me that was my bad for giving the mic out. I appreciate your perspective, sir. And look, I came here, and part of the reason I gave you the microphone, not only to introduce myself, and not only to tell you what I believe and what my vision is for the country, but to listen to and learn from you. And I hear you on this. I just want to add something to what you said, which is that every other developed country has cell phones, has video games, probably has a lower attendance at church than you do here in the United States, but comes nowhere close to the level of bloodshed and carnage and gun violence that we have here in the United States of America. And it's not because of lack of faith or lack of church attendance. It is because we have given a blank check to the gun lobby and the gun industry and the NRA, who will not even literally allow the members of Congress that they've bought and paid for to study gun violence. The Centers for Disease Control in the United States of America is by law prevented from studying gun violence. It would be as though if 50 years ago we said, let's not study the links between tobacco smoke and lung cancer and the hundreds of thousands of deaths that we have in this country, lest we learn the truth and have to do something about it. So the last thing I was going to say on this platform of saving lives in America and standing up to the gun lobby is, in addition to universal background checks, red flag laws, and ending the sales of weapons of war, we've got to buy back those weapons of war that are already on the streets. Every AK-47, AR-15 that is out there, you may own one. You may be using it responsibly. You purchased it legally. You have no intent of harming anyone. But I want to tell you, that is an instrument of terror in this country. When the gunman who killed 22 people in El Paso, Texas on August 3rd of this year ordered and received an AK-47, his mom called the police in Allen, Texas and said, "What in the hell does my son need with this? He's not in the military. He has not been trained for it. You do not need it to hunt nor to protect yourself in your home. It's designed to kill people." And that's exactly what it does. When I met with the doctors and the trauma surgeons who treated the people who had been shot by that deranged individual, fueled by hatred and racism unleashed in part by this president, those same doctors and surgeons we're also working at William Beaumont Army Medical Center. Our military doctors who have served on the battlefield in Iraq and Afghanistan, and the injuries that they described to me are akin to those injuries that they saw on the battlefield. That high-impact, high-velocity round, it leaves all of its kinetic injury inside, you all right? Inside of your body, destroys the soft tissues, the internal organs, shreds the inside of you so that you will bleed to death and not be able to get back up on the battlefield. So keep that shit on the battlefield and do not bring it into my life or into my community or into our churches or into our synagogues or into our Walmarts or into anywhere. We don't need it. And I've got to tell you, in the face of this gun violence, in the face of this racism that is foundational to this country as we commemorate 400 years, August of 1619, the first slave kidnapped from West Africa, brought here to the United States, sold against their will to build the greatness and the wealth and the riches of this country, their descendants prohibited from fully enjoying in the greatness that they built here in the first place. If we are unwilling to confront these truths and be honest about what is happening in this country, I guarantee you we will never make it better, and we will leave ourselves open to the kind of demagogues who are in office right now. Donald Trump, who has not once, not twice, but thousands of times over on Facebook and Twitter warned of an invasion of immigrants coming to this country, called them killers, predators, animals and infestation. I might describe cockroaches or termites as an infestation. You might hear that term applied to human beings in the Third Reich. It seems so unnatural and un-American to hear it here in this country, and yet that is the word that our president uses. And when, at a rally in Florida in May of this year, and he's talking about this invasion of immigrants who are coming to get us, who, by the way, commit crimes in this country at a far lower rate than those who are born in this country. He asked the crowd, "What are we going to do about these people?" And someone yells out, "Shoot them." And the crowd literally roars their approval. And you can watch the video. The president smiles and laughs and smirks and says that this is okay in the United States of America in 2019. And that killer, who with the AK-47 that his mom was wondering why in the world he had ordered in the first place, drove 600 miles, posted a manifesto online warning of an invasion, fear of being replaced as the majority in this country by Hispanics who are going to take over, using the exact same language that the President of the United States of America is using, that those hosts on Fox News are using. The fact that we have hate crimes on the rise every single one of the last 3 years without fail. The fact that the day after the president signed an executive order attempting to ban Muslim travel to the United States, the mosque in Victoria, Texas was burned to the ground. The fact that when the president warned of caravans coming to this country to get us, perhaps financed by wealthy Jewish Americans, someone walks into the Tree of Life synagogue in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, United States of America, and begins to shoot and kill Jewish Americans, warning of a caravan financed by them coming to this country to get him. It is not just offensive to us, what the president is saying. It is changing us, what the president is saying. And it seems somehow that the bigger the lie, the more obscene the injustice, the more bizarre his behavior, the less capable we are of seeing it clearly and speaking honestly and acting decisively, but we must. And so not only changing our gun laws, but not only being not racist, but deciding that we are going to be anti-racist, that we are going to stamp out white supremacy and white nationalist terror in the United States of America, that we understand that when the president pushes communities down, terrorizes our fellow Americans, we've got to be there for them to lift them up. We were in Mississippi last week, the site of the largest single state immigration raid in this country's history. 700 people, almost all of them from Guatemala, many of whom have been here not for a couple of months, but for a couple of decades, working in chicken processing plants for $8.50 an hour, $12 an hour, getting ahead, providing for their kids, contributing to the success of their community. Those workplaces raided, tasers used on some of the people who were there, tied by the wrists, tied by the ankles, sometimes their wrists and ankles tied together like you would tie a hog, kept in detention, deported in some cases for the crime of coming here and working one of the toughest jobs in America, trying to get ahead for themselves, called to the greatness of this country and wanting to contribute to it as well. We've seen a 10-fold increase in workplace immigration raids under this administration. It is no wonder that so many Hispanic Americans feel like they have a target on their back, whether it's from the Walmart shooting on August 3rd, these workplace raids, the president's rhetoric describing them as killers and rapists and drug dealers and criminals, all of which he has said. This is going to change us. So listen, how do we meet this? It is not only defeating Donald Trump, as important as that it is not only, well, it is not only making sure that we defend those who so far have been defenseless. It is also elevating them through our laws. So what if we decided together, the people of Florence and El Paso, the United States of America, Republicans, Democrats and independents alike, we're going to rewrite this country's immigration laws in our own image, to reflect our values, to free every single dreamer from any fear of deportation by making them U.S. citizens in this, their true home country. Never again locking up a child or separating her from her family, knowing full well we've lost the lives of 7 children in our custody and care just this year. The wealthiest country on the face of the planet, one comprised of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees from the planet over, doing this to people who want to come here and make us better. El Paso, Texas, my hometown, one of, if not the safest cities in the United States of America, not despite, but because we are a city of immigrants and asylum seekers and refugees. Reflect that in our laws. Make us live our values. Legalize the people who are here and create a lawful, quick, safe path to join family, to work a job, or to go to school in the United States of America. Don't think that that's too much to ask. Y luego, and I'll conclude with this because I want to get to your questions. If we fail to make progress on the concerns of our day-to-day lives, so the fact that so many people have to scrounge in order to afford medication, or cannot take their child to a therapist, or go to see a mental health care provider because it's just too expensive, the premiums, the co-pays unaffordable, or they're just not eligible for health care in America, we are letting them down. And we are also providing fertile ground for the kind of demagogues like Donald Trump, who will exploit the anger, the dissatisfaction at the dysfunction in Washington, D.C. So delivering on universal, guaranteed, high-quality health care, meaning primary health care, mental health care, and every woman making her own decisions about her own body kind of health care in America. It's the right thing to do, and is absolutely necessary if we're going to save this country. And that's true for the economy. $15 an hour as the base for a minimum wage so that you don't have to work 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Paying teachers and public school educators a living wage so that they don't have to take 2 or 3 jobs. Ensuring that we can form unions and have the right to organize, create apprenticeships, have high-skill, high-wage jobs in the United States of America. Y por último, you all have lived and understand climate change, the severity of the storms that have hit this community, the frequency with which they occur, the devastation that we see here in Houston, Texas, in my home state, where Harvey dumped 58 inches of rain just during one storm. It's a landfall record in North America, and it was the third 500-year flood in just 5 years. In El Paso, Texas, today, we were 102 degrees. It's the 14th day in the month of August that we've been over 100 degrees. We just broke the record for as long as we've been keeping them in El Paso, Texas. In fact, my hometown is warming faster than almost any other city in the United States of America on this trajectory. Sooner or later, Florence, Charleston, El Paso, Texas will no longer support human life. We're seeing the devastation and the consequences right now. So confronting climate change, freeing ourselves from a dependence on fossil fuels, embracing renewable energy technology, investing in the resiliency of our communities, incredibly important if we're going to save one another and if we're going to save this country. And I believe in our ability to do all of these things. I think we just have to be honest and open and really clear about the threats that we face and what it's going to take to come together around the solutions that will overcome them. Thank you all for being with us here tonight. Looking forward to your questions. Cynthia, you've got the microphone.
Yep. Okay, you can go first.
If you're not the candidate, which somebody's not going to be, would you pledge to work just as hard, make your people work, or encourage them to work just as hard to get Trump out of the White House?
Yes. Yes. Look, we've got an amazing field of candidates right now. If it's a problem, it's the best problem the Democratic Party or democracy has ever had. I'm going to do everything I can to make the case for my candidacy, Coming from the U.S.-Mexico border, the very place the president is trying to demonize and vilify right now, I can speak to it and about it in a powerful, positive, compelling way, showing immigrants their very presence makes us stronger, more successful, and more secure. This Senate campaign that we ran last year, going to every one of the 254 counties, winning more votes than any Democrat had in the history of the state, winning independence for the first time in decades, winning 500,000 Republicans who joined our cause as well. I think that's the movement we need to defeat Donald Trump. But if we are not successful, I will do everything within my power to make sure that our nominee is successful to defeat Donald Trump and to bring this country together again. Thank you for asking.
Okay, we're right here.
Hi. So I have a lot of concerns for the future going forward, but one of my main concerns is transgender rights. So transgender youth are about twice as likely to attempt to suicide as their cisgender counterparts, and that's due to the rise in anti-trans bullying and anti-trans violence, anti-trans legislation. What would you do to guarantee protections for trans youth?
Thank you for being here and for asking the question. In my mind, this is all connected. Much as racism has been an open or an undercurrent in this country for the last 400 years, it's just that the president has now brought it out into the open and made it permissible to be racist openly in America again and to act violently on it. He's done the same thing when it comes to transgender Americans by tweet, telling them that they are no longer welcome to serve in the armed forces, dishonoring the service of countless transgender service members going back to God only knows when, who have put their lives on the line for this country, sacrificed their lives for this country, saved the lives of our fellow Americans for this country. So rolling back his transgender troop ban is number one. But number two is speaking with pride about transgender members of our community in Texas. We debated a bathroom bill, literally, and you may be aware of this, that sought to scare parents about transgender kids coming into their child's bathroom, though we know, to your point, that transgender children are far more likely to be the victims and the perpetrators of attacks to tragic consequences for them. So speaking with pride, signing into law the Equality Act so the full civil rights of every single American are respected, that you can no longer be fired based on your sexual orientation or denied the ability to adopt, as you are in Texas, based on who you love right now. That is so screwed up. It's 2019. Let's get with it and bring everybody in to this country. Thank you.
Congressman, so far you've spoken about your values, and everybody in this room shares your values or we wouldn't be here. But none of them are going to come to pass if we don't defeat Donald Trump. What makes you and your candidacy uniquely qualified more than any of the other Democrats to face Donald Trump, knowing he's going to lie, he's going to cheat, he's going to steal, he's going to do whatever he can to get reelected?
Thank you for the question. You know, I mentioned where I am, where Amy and I are raising our kids right now, how the U.S.-Mexico border figures into the national conversation. We've talked about the campaign that we ran in Texas that brought everyone in. We could care less about the differences of political affiliation or geography and the results that it produced. But I'll also tell you this, we've squared off against Donald Trump before, and we've come out on top. More than a year ago, you might remember this, Donald Trump announced a zero-tolerance policy at the U.S.-Mexico border. That means every single child apprehended with a family member was taken from their family, literally torn from the breast of their mother, if that's what it took. Very often, the parents were sent back to the very countries from which they fled. The kids put in cages, and then many of them sent to a tent camp in the desert just outside of El Paso in a place called Tornillo. We were there as soon as we learned that it was happening, and we, along with others in the community, convened hundreds and then thousands of people to come down to El Paso, to Tornillo, not the easiest place in the world to get to bear witness, to testify to our fellow Americans, to make sure those kids inside knew that we knew that they were in there, and we're going to do everything in our power to get them out. And within months, we were able to compel all of us, the Trump administration to stop that policy, and a few months after that, to fully close down Tornillo. It is that same kind of public attention and public pressure and political will that we have formed around the Border Patrol detention facility in Clint, around Donald Trump coming to El Paso, Texas, after the shooting that he inspired, and making sure that we took to the streets to remind him and this country who we are at the end of the day, that our differences are not dangerous or disqualifying. In fact, they make us stronger and safer or more secure than we otherwise would have been. I don't think any one of us alone is going to defeat Donald Trump. I think it is all of us coming together, and that is always the way that I've served. It's the way that I'm campaigning right now, and I would love to have your help to do that. Thank you for asking. Appreciate it. Got it.
All right. So I feel that a lot of your campaign isn't what you're going to do, but is to defeat Donald Trump, and that Trump's a racist, and that... Okay, well, I completely disagree with that.
It's all right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Despite not having any actual evidence that Donald Trump's a racist, besides... Let me finish.
Let's let him finish. Let's let him finish.
Despite not having any real evidence that he's a racist,
Go ahead, finish.
Let's let him finish. Let's let him finish.
how do you... What is your opinion that... Or like, I don't... All right. Under the Trump administration, black unemployment is the lowest it's ever been. Hispanic unemployment is the lowest it's ever been.
It's okay. We got to let him talk, folks. We got to let him talk.
The
Please.
black medium income for the black communities is on a rise. That's not true. But so, do you have any actual evidence that Trump is a racist, or and what more are you going to do for the minority communities than Trump has already done and his administration's already done?
Thank you so much for being here. So you're asking for actual evidence, and I've talked about his repeated warnings of invasions, of dehumanizing or attempting to dehumanize people by calling them animals. Those are words he's used. Predators, killers. Somebody mentioned shithole countries, which was his description of nations in Africa, or wanting to have more immigrants from Sweden and Norway, which he has also said. Or how about this? 4 women of color, duly elected by their constituents, he told them to go back to their country when this is their country. His attack on Elijah Cummings, he was, somebody just reminded me that he was one of the original birthers about Obama, questioning his fitness to serve as president because he questioned whether he was born here, joining others who questioned whether President Obama was a Christian or a Muslim or was part of some plot to undermine or attack this country. So much of Make America Great Again is reflected of this underlying racism that Donald Trump has been perfectly open about. Klansmen, neo-Nazis, white supremacists who marched in the streets of Charlottesville and said, Jews, you will not replace them. President Trump said they're very fine people. So I don't know how much more evidence we need for the president's racism and the consequences of that racism. And I mentioned, it is not just that it offends us. It is the mosque in Victoria, Texas, the shooting in El Paso, Texas, the hate crimes on the rise literally every single one of the last 3 years. Every single county in which he had a Trump rally saw hate crimes rise by more than 200%. If we can't make that connection together, we're not working with the same set of facts. I don't want to debate you. You asked a question, I answered your question. All right. Thank you.
By the bar. Beto, by the bar. Back by the bar. By the bar. Behind you.
I'm happy to talk to you.
I don't think he can hear. Behind you, by the bar. Behind you. Okay. Here we go. And we have time for a few more questions.
Here in South Carolina, we had a... Speaker. We had a 1,000-year flood only about 4 years ago. And there are areas of the state that are actually still recovering from it. and then it's coming September, and it won't be a surprise if we get another hurricane. But we found that across the state, areas don't recover at the same rate. The low-income communities are most often forgotten about. As president, how would you prioritize that these low-income communities that are often forgotten and make sure that they receive attention, since they are often disproportionately impacted by the impacts of climate change and already pre-existing pollution?
Thanks for asking the question. You know, and sir, to your point, one of the best predictors of your proximity to a polluter is the color of your skin and your income right now. It's no accident where these are located and the neighborhoods around them and who lives in those neighborhoods. And it's also no accident about who bears the brunt of climate change right now. I mentioned those 500-year storms in Houston, Texas. Look at the neighborhoods that they affected, or to your point, the floods in 2015, or the hurricanes that followed, and the fact that they're happening with more frequency, dumping more rain, more devastating. Some people are paying more of a price than others. You ask what we're going to do about it. Over the next 10 years, we will mobilize $5 trillion. Much of that will be spent on the resiliency of communities who we can now safely predict will see more flooding, or more droughts, or more wildfires, or more effects of climate change, more sea level rise that we're seeing in Charleston and other coastal areas right now. We also, though, have to invest in the next generation of renewable energy technologies, the jobs that come with those, and making sure those jobs are available to everyone. I mentioned unions and elevating their role, the apprenticeships, so that we train people to perform those jobs that are going to be great for them and their families, wonderful for this country and our economy, and are going to save this planet for the generations that follow. So I want to acknowledge the truth of what you said, that there are some who've already experienced climate change for years now. We've got to be there for them first and put them first in line for the benefits as we transition this country and this economy to confront this challenge before it's too late. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate that.
To your left.
I'm just following
right
Cynthia.
here,
She's got a
over
microphone.
here. And I have time for 3 more.
Sir, my son is a type 1 diabetic, and fortunately he's covered with Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance. Last weekend, he went to the CVS in Myrtle Beach, and his druggist or the pharmacist said that if he came back tomorrow, he could have 3 units, which I assume are bottles. But he said, I have a low blood sugar, and I need to have it tonight. And he said, well, you can buy it. It's $288. I'm aware that there are only 3 companies in the United States that produce insulin, Novo Nordisk, Eli Lilly, and one other. I don't really remember who, but they all apparently have patents. And I know that it's 1/10 of the cost in other countries. This business of capitalism to the extreme seems to have gotten out of control, particularly as it relates to medicines. What are your comments?
Thank you for sharing the story. There are, unfortunately, in the year 2019, in the wealthiest, the most ingenious country the world has ever known, people who are dying of diabetes. 97 years after insulin was developed by scientists in Canada, who I believe sold it to the government of Canada for $3, 3 Canadian dollars. No hope of royalty or profit. They just wanted to save the lives of their fellow human beings. And yet, 97 years after that life-saving innovation, you just expressed that we've priced people out of being able to save their own lives. We've really placed a greater priority on the profits of these corporations. They've been able to act with complete impunity, although thanks to Oklahoma, that's beginning to change. A big settlement yesterday against the opioid manufacturers and Johnson & Johnson. But you're asking, how do we bring these prices down? We begin by allowing Medicare to use its negotiating power and the leverage in all of the medications that they buy to bring those prices down, not just for Medicare beneficiaries, Medicaid, TRICARE, VA beneficiaries, but for everyone who has private insurance in this country as well. We outlaw political action committee contributions from those pharmaceutical companies and any other corporation in this country so that we're listening to our constituents, to people, not to profits. We allow you or your son to buy medications if they are more affordable in Canada, the European Union, Japan, as long as they have the same high standard of care and quality. If it's at a lower price, then by all means, let our fellow Americans buy those medications. And then I mentioned earlier, ensuring that healthcare, including access to prescription medications, is not a function of luck, or fortune or who your folks are or where you work, but it's just something that you can count on in this country. So universal, guaranteed, high-quality health care with no copays for life-saving medicines like insulin. Thank you for asking the question. Appreciate it.
Hi. I would like to know about the environment in Indonesia and how all of our trashes around the world funnel to Indonesia, and we have these plastic islands. I think we should put one up for sale for Trump and see if he'll go buy one. What would we do? I mean, we need to come together as the world to stop that from happening and have a better way of recycling. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Could not agree more. And we just saw yet another blown opportunity yesterday. While the other G7 countries are meeting around the environment, confronting climate change before it is too late, our president is literally absent. There are hundreds of countries who have signed the Paris Climate Agreement. There's one on the face of the earth that has exempted itself from that commitment, and it is the United States of America. If we warm another 1.5 degrees Celsius, it is over for the generations that follow, and you never get it back. You have then triggered something that you will never be able to control again. Some people warn that it may already be too late. I don't think so. I know that there is still time, but it's going to take everything from every single one of us. No half steps, no half measures, and it can't be just half the country. It's got to be all of us. So it's those of us here in Florence. It is farmers who we can pay for environmental services like planting cover crops or keeping more carbon in the soil with no-till farming. It is the investment in the next generation of technologies. And then it's convening the powers of the planet to all do their part as well, whether it's plastic waste or these dead zones in the ocean or the fact that the lungs of planet Earth are burning in the Amazon right now. This is the defining, deciding moment of truth for the planet, and we better be up for this moment and be able to overcome it. So you've got my commitment to make that a priority. Very grateful. Appreciate it. Gracias.
Right here. Here we go. This is our last one right here.
Mr. O'Rourke, you had mentioned racism earlier. Let's look at it from an economic perspective. Black Americans in this country own 2.6% of the wealth in this nation, not income, wealth. We're 14% of the population. White Americans own around 90% of the wealth in this nation. There's been a lot of talk about reparations. My question is twofold. Do you personally, outside of Congress, outside of the White House, outside of the presidential race, do you personally, in principle, believe that the Black American descendants of slaves should receive cash payment reparations? If you do not, what closes that black-white racial wealth gap?
So I agree with you about the underlying premise of the question and what has created it. The kidnapping and enslavement of people and then denying their descendants through Jim Crow, redlining, segregation, and suppression that is alive and well in the United States of America today, the ability to fully participate in the greatness that their ancestors produced in the first place. I believe, and I follow the lead of others who've worked on this issue like Sheila Jackson Lee, that having a reparations commission that brings everyone to the table to tell their story and the full story of this country is the best possible path forward to decide the answer to your question. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if it is a cash payment, what the amount is. I would much rather that we begin the conversation by listening to everyone, including you, to make that determination, and that in the meantime, we also look at the disparities that we have in every single part of American life today, how in a kindergarten classroom, you are 5 times as likely to be disciplined or suspended or expelled if you are a child of color, that the schoolhouse to jailhouse pipeline begins at 4 or 5 years old when you are absolutely vulnerable and defenseless. We need to have more teachers who look like their students in the classroom. We need to bridge the minority-majority funding gap in our school districts. I see you. we need to make sure that we recognize that we also have disparities in healthcare, a maternal mortality crisis that is 3 times as deadly for women of color. So in addition to universal healthcare, we also, what are you doing? Okay, I don't know if you were having a medical condition or let me. Why don't we respect this guy's time? He asked me a question and I'm answering it, and I'm happy to talk with you afterwards. Thank you for being here. Don't worry about it. So in addition to universal health care, it also means home health care visits, which have been shown to improve healthcare outcomes for black women and women of color in this country. And then we look at how we make sure that we get capital out to communities that have been denied it through redlining. And that means doubling the size of community development finance institutions to fund small businesses in this country, including businesses owned by black women who are growing and creating businesses at 14 times the rate as the rest of the country. So these are some actions that we can take right now that will make things better, but I agree with you. Ultimately, you need some form of reparation to repair the damage done and to ensure that we are not visiting this injustice on future generations. So thank you for asking. Appreciate it. Yes.
Congressman, I know the cameras want to get this because this is an important question for towns like in rural South Carolina, around the country too, but you're here. Half a mile from Florence, agrarian, poverty, minority white, minority black, minority brown. Other communities, 5 blocks with that kind of minority poverty. What can be done by the government for that?
Appreciate you asking this question. There are so many things that we can do that are within reach right now, where there is broad consensus on the solutions. What if you could earn a minimum wage, and that minimum wage guaranteed that you were going to be able to meet the rent or the mortgage note and put food on the table, take care of yourself and your kids, and actually have time to spend with them? In that kindergarten classroom where we're talking about the disparities in discipline, a lot of kids are already 10 months behind in reading comprehension. More likely than not, they're the children, white or black, of parents who work in a second or a third job and do not have the luxury to read to their child before the first day of kindergarten. So a minimum wage that is a living wage that is pegged to inflation, so that as cost of living goes up, so do your wages, is a great place to start. Paid family leave that is universal in this country, so you're not punished if you are sick or a family member is sick. That'll go a long way. But also partnering with rural communities, and that means elevating the farmer, the grower, the rancher, allowing them to make a profit on what they produce that feeds not just this country, but so much of the rest of the world. Partnering with them on broadband internet that is missing from so much of rural America. I mean, try looking for a job or finishing your education or finding a date if you can't get online. So much of rural America can't do that, and it's keeping them behind. I want to make that investment and partner with rural America so that we lift them up as well. So these are some things that we can do. I really appreciate you asking the question. Florence, I was promised this was going to be fun, and it was. Thank you all for having us out. We are really grateful. We'll stick around to say hello to a few folks who want to be here. Really grateful. Thank you very much.